Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, July 23rd, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about Tudor Dixon, the new frontrunner for the Michigan gubernatorial race on the Republican side, who makes a claim on a TV interview that in the issue of rape or incest, an abortion ban should not be allowed or implemented, or abortion access should not be allowed or implemented for those women in those very unfortunate situations. Now, for full disclosure, as we get into this video, I do want you to understand that I believe that there should be a legal right to abortion, especially in the case of rape and incest, and I get that does detract a bit from my nonpartisanship, and I do recognize that, which is why I'm telling you that right now. It's one of the very few issues that I like to be very open about, just because it allows me to be more transparent about my analytics and thinking about this, and why I think certain comments and decisions such as this one are more impactful, I would say, as it does require myself to disclose my position on this issue. In addition to that, we're going to be talking a little bit more on a personal level about why this is something that really just doesn't work, and it also is just a very touchy subject, one that definitely requires you to be a little bit more open about where you're standing and what you believe in, as it is an issue that I think generally is going to be very captivating for the upcoming midterms and extremely polarizing. So now that I've been entirely honest with you about where my stance is right now, I do still want to take a look at this from a nonpartisan standpoint as much as I can. Of course, I'm a human. There is an inherent bias, and I am going to have some level of a pushback on the statement that was made by Tudor Dixon, but I also do want to say that I'm not going to be alone in this one. And I think the state of Michigan, as we will later discuss, is also going to push back on comments such as this one, because honestly speaking, I think this is a turning point for the Republican campaign that is only going to continue to sink their diminishing chances at winning the governorship. Now, to give you a better idea of where the Michigan governor's race has been for quite some time, currently speaking, the lead for the Republicans for Tudor Dixon, who is labeled as a conservative media personality, is not exactly that large. It's 6 points across all of the polls that we have seen, but it's still very much a close race. It's a three-way race right now between Kevin Rinke, Ryan Kelly, and Tudor Dixon. So far, Tudor Dixon has been able to maintain the lead. Previously, Ryan Kelly was in the lead. Ryan Kelly is the Republican nominee I made a video on before, who used to be the frontrunner, who was arrested by the FBI on January 6th charges, and has only been continued to be further and further harmed by court cases, news media coverage, etc., etc. He's someone who I think the GOP really needed to push away from, and they did. And they decided to prop up Tudor Dixon. Now, before any of these candidates actually became within a three-way race or a realistic shot at winning the primary, there actually was a previous frontrunner, someone named James Craig. Now, he was the former chief of the Detroit police, and he resigned in order to run for governor, but unfortunately for him, he did not get the required number of signatures to end up on the ballot. And you might be thinking, okay, how can he be the frontrunner if he couldn't get the required signatures? You needed 15,000 signatures. There's millions of voters in the state of Michigan. So how does this happen? It happens because he hired this company. They forged signatures. He wasn't the only one. 4 other candidates did. And thus 5 candidates in this race were forced to remove themselves from the ballot. And then as a result, it went up to the Michigan Supreme Court and they sided with the Board of Elections. So a lot of drama, a lot of things going on. And now there is a new Republican frontrunner in the state of Michigan. As for the Democratic side, there isn't much that's really that interesting. Gretchen Whitmer is running unopposed. She is the presumptive nominee, and she's practically been campaigning for the general election. The only problem for Democrats is that they don't know who the Republican nominee is going to be, but that also is very much so a problem for the GOP. Now, Tudor Dixon, with this new lead, probably is going to maintain it. Dixon is one of the very few people who has already met with President Trump in discussions of an endorsement, or practically an endorsement in the way that Donald Trump has spoken about her before. He didn't wholeheartedly endorse her. There also was some consideration before that she was going to be the nominee, even before the other 5 candidates had been forced to drop out. But back then, she was only polling at 2, 3, 4%. So definitely the clearing of the field was able to elevate her, and also the pushback on Ryan Kelly likely pushed up her numbers to the 28%, 19%, 26% from what was low single digits prior to the disqualification. Now, should she win this nomination, I think that these new comments that she has said are probably going to weigh her down. I also can't imagine that these comments are going to be anything different in a month from now, or 2 months from now, or 3 months from now as we head into the general election. To look at the state of Michigan from its swing state standpoint, you might think that half the voters here are pro-life and half of them are pro-choice, and that it wouldn't matter the way that a Republican candidate would feel because it is a Republican Democratic state, meaning it's a swing state. It just goes back and forth. But the problem actually lies in the fact that the state of Michigan isn't as much of a swing state when it comes down to the issue of abortion. 54% of adults in Michigan believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. 42% say they believe it should be illegal in all or most cases. That is a margin there of about 12%. And that's so important because right now there is a declaration within the Michigan Constitution that says that abortion is illegal. Now, it's on the state to enforce it, but should a Republican end up into office, such as Tudor Dixon, there is a very real possibility that abortion becomes entirely restricted across the state. And as we have seen from this frontrunner, there is only one exception that this Republican is willing to compromise on, and that is the mother's life at risk, who she also has individual determinations and definitions for, rather than what would be normally used by a doctor or anyone in medical practice. And doubling down on that, she believes that this should not include cases of rape or incest. That is where this gets very tricky for the Republican Party, because you can't walk back statements such as this one. I've seen the exact interview and what she said. In fact, she said that a 14-year-old girl who has become pregnant as a response to incestuous rape should still carry the baby to term. She used that exact example and in fact said it was a perfect example of why she believes that life is the most sacred thing, why she believes that life is important to be chosen in that circumstance. It's one of the worst cases I have seen in terms of a theoretical example, and it is also one of the worst handlings of this that I have seen for a Republican in a swing state. You've seen this happen for Republicans, not even necessarily in swing states, but also in safe Republican states. This reminds me a lot of what happened with Representative Todd Akin back in 2012. He has since passed away, but in 2012 he ran for Senate, and he made a comment saying that the body shuts down if rape happens to a woman. Now here's the problem with that. It obviously isn't true. And voters were outraged. They were so angry that they re-elected Claire McCaskill, a Democrat who went on to lose 6 years later by 6 points in Missouri, by over 15 percentage points on the same ballot that they chose Mitt Romney in the presidential election by double digits. Over a 25-point swing between the presidential margin for the GOP and the Senate margin for the Democratic Party because of these comments. Claire McCaskill probably could have won re-election had these comments not come out, but it became very clear from this moment, from this exact interview, the Democrats were going to lock it down. A very similar thing happened in Safe Red, Indiana, went to Mitt Romney by double digits. But what you found here is that Richard Murdoch, the Republican nominee for Senate in 2012, said that a woman, if she is impregnated during rape, is something that God intended. These comments circulating around abortion, circulating around sexual assault, rape, etc., are things that have really proven to be detrimental to the GOP because, as it has been established by many, many voters, they consistently choose the wrong side of it in these individual cases. Todd Akin chose the illogical, insane response to a question such as that one that was completely unfounded, and voters rejected him. Richard Murdoch did the same exact thing. And looking at the views on abortion in the state of Michigan, I can't say Tudor Dixon is at all increasing her chance at winning. Even Donald Trump is not this pro in terms of an abortion ban, and because of the fact that Roe versus Wade had been overturned now for the first time in 49 years, nobody was voting with this in mind in the past. Maybe it was there in the back of their heads, but realistically speaking, the Supreme Court was liberal enough that it wasn't going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Decades upon decades of it being tried and tested have consistently upheld the precedent that Roe v. Wade declared abortion a constitutional right until a more conservative court came in, and as a result, what you found was that now this is a very realistic possibility that abortion access is limited in the state of Michigan. And the even more worse part for the Republican Party is that Dixon now being replaced for Ryan Kelly in the 538 forecast now has a 2% less chance at winning the governorship. That may not seem super consequential, but it reduces Tudor Dixon's chance at winning down to just 7%. 7% in a state that Joe Biden won by less than 3 points. In a state that the GOP had been heavily targeting and heavily eyeing up for a very long period of time. In addition to that, James Craig, if you remember his name, he was the previous frontrunner before he was disqualified by the Michigan Board of Elections, was leading Gretchen Whitmer on a generic ballot, on a regular ballot for the governorship. And looking at where it stands right now, no Republican stands a high chance at defeating Gretchen Whitmer. In fact, she remains in the low 90s in terms of a chance at re-election. So when this happened, and these were the chances before Dixon's interview, I can only imagine how easily Gretchen Whitmer will play this up, especially with this constitutional provision on the ballot and also under consideration for depending on whoever becomes governor. The state of Michigan is clearly pro-abortion, clearly pro-access to abortion. And that's how it has been for the past few decades. You can see that in poll after poll after poll. And even before these comments were made, Tudor Dixon had a 7% chance of victory. Looking at the general election numbers, I can't say that I'd hope or spend too much on Tudor Dixon's campaign. Realistically speaking, this doesn't look too winnable for the GOP at this point in time, and this comment certainly isn't going to help this November election. Does this comment mean that Dixon is absolutely going to lose the race? I don't know yet. And the reason why I say I don't know is not because I'm trying to criticize the GOP or attack them for this position or attack Tudor Dixon for making this statement, but rather being entirely honest about this. You know, looking at whether or not she can win, I think that there is still a slim chance just because of our national environment. 2012 was a year that Obama was able to win, but at the same time, this state doesn't seem to be too kind to the GOP already, and I can't imagine that these comments are helping whatsoever. The Republican Party is in a crossroads right now where they are making some pretty bold statements on the issues of abortion, except this time it matters more than it had in the past 50 years. No governor had ever successfully banned abortion in a state until now. In the past 49 years, not a single governor was able to do it. Laws had been implemented, then they were brought up to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court struck them down. They did not do that this time, meaning that issues such as this one are going to be very mainstream. On top of that, this question about abortion access in the state of Michigan doesn't even cover what you see here when it comes down to the issue of rape and incest. When you poll this question on the national level, and it's very similar to what you see in the state of Michigan, you find that a significantly higher portion of Americans who even are pro-life, declaratively pro-life, believe that abortion should be allowed in the case of rape, incest, or a mother's life at risk. That's why those three issues are consistently used in a listing pattern, because those are the very few exceptions that Republicans are willing to concede to the Democratic Party. But Tudor Dixon absolutely isn't. Looking at it here, she says, quote, "A life is a life for me. That's how it is. That is for me. That's my feeling." She said if a 14-year-old girl was raped by an uncle, she would not support abortion. And this is where it gets tricky, and this is where it gets very difficult for me, honestly, to see how the GOP does win this race. If I'm looking at this from someone who might be voting in the state of Michigan, obviously I'm not from the state and I can't vote in the November election in Michigan, but if I was, and I'm someone who, as I feel, who I've already told you my beliefs on the issue of abortion access in the United States, I could very much tell you that that does not make me more inclined or willing to vote for Tudor Dixon. In fact, pushes me away from her. Even as someone who, some people would say is a swing voter, I think there are people out there, independents, centrists, etc., that look at this and say, I am pro-choice, I am pro-X, 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 pro-conservative policy on one hand, pro-liberal policy on the other, but very much pro-choice. And there are many voters out there just like that, because Biden didn't win the election in Michigan by 12 points. It didn't come down to an exact margin by abortion access, and that's not the most important issue to voters. But it is an important one now. A more important one than more so than in the past 49 years in America. There are very significant implications of these comments made, and I don't think the GOP has fully realized the gravity of what a statement such as this one, especially on recording, especially on video. Once Tudor Dixon wins this nomination based off of where the political betting markets are, based off of where the predictions are, based off of where the polling numbers are on the Republican side, Gretchen Whitmer's team is going to go full force. And I think that it could be very, very effective at crushing what little remnants of a winnable campaign Tudor Dixon's campaign will have after winning the primary. A 7% chance today. It could slightly rise. I wouldn't be surprised if on election day it was at 15%, but I don't think it will be a result or any benefit from the comments that she has been making. Just more so a closeness because of our national environment. But at the end of the day, Gretchen Whitmer wasn't the favorite in this race in the very beginning. In fact, looking at the disqualification, that was the real turning point for the Democratic Party. Looking at when that happened versus the political betting markets, Republicans had the advantage. Today, they stand at a point where they just have 23 cents for a yes share, which is their lowest during the entirety entirety of this campaign season. We will see what happens this November. Tudor Dixon's campaign and her comments have really seemed to be harming herself. In addition to that, I think that it will be harming down-ballot Republicans across the state of Michigan. This should have been a winnable race for the GOP. They should have been the favorites at this point in time, especially considering where Biden is and the National Democrats are. But unfortunately for them, not only are they not the favorites, but they have a less than 1 in 10 chance at victory with their clearly established frontrunner, who has been making some very different claims from what the national GOP would have liked her to. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.